if you look at what's happened over the last 8 weeks and compare that's what really to what's happened over the last 8 years, you'll see there's a tremendous difference. Tremendous difference.
America dropping the mother of all bombs on ISIS in Afghanistan, launching missile strikes on Syria, and our Navy warships are headed towards North Korea. So as President Trump looks to increase military spending by $54 billion, will we need to spend even more than that as tensions rise around the world? Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Bolling. Welcome to Cashing In. Our Cashing In crew this week: Lisa Booth, Rachel Campo-Stuffy, and Richard Fowler. Welcome. Lisa, now, with all these things going on, do we need more military spending to keep America safe on top of that additional $54 billion they're proposing?
We might, and I trust the advice of our military leaders that President Trump has designated to lead our Department of Defense, like Secretary Mattis. And look, we can always look for ways to cut waste, fraud, and abuse and spend more money efficiently, but it shouldn't come at the expense of our soldiers or protecting this great country. We need to be able to match the current threat level that we're facing. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of threats that this country is facing. And the big problem right now is if you look at our military, the military preparedness is at a low. You look at the Navy, the smallest fleet in 100 years. You look at the Army, out of 58 combat brigade teams, only 3 are ready for combat. So that's a big problem.
Yeah, and Rachel, so we've been dealing with this sequester for quite a while. Finally, we're getting a military budget that's bumping up $54 billion, as we talked about. But look how much things cost. You know, that Syrian strike a couple of weeks ago, those Tomahawks were estimated around $800,000 each. So a 59 Tomahawk strike, the cost for this thing could approach $100 million. It's expensive to defend the country.
It is, but that's the #1 job of government, right? Look, peace through strength. Ronald Reagan did that. He had reinvested in our military. He lifted their morale. And he had an arms race with Russia that ended up bankrupting them, and so we won the Cold War without having to fire a shot. So I think this is a really good investment, but I don't think that Donald Trump should give up on what I think is his sweet spot. Remember that tweet he sent to Boeing when they gave him that inflated $4 billion price tag on Air Force One? He said, look, I want you to make money, Boeing, but not that much money. So I hope that he's still helping or directing his people at the Pentagon to keep an eye on the cost, because we do know there's fat that can be cut and there's wasteful spending, and we need this money to be very well and efficiently used. And can I just say one last thing? My dad, by the way, was a military man who lived under the Carter years and experienced how great it was to have Ronald Reagan come in and reinvest in the military. I think we're having a moment like that. And I think the left hates funding the military because the military turns a lot of Democrat minorities, like my dad, who's a Mexican-American who became a Republican during the military, because it's a culture of patriotism and discipline and of course, merit-based promotion. So I think there's a lot to it. I think there's a need for more investment in the military.
And I don't mean to cut you off, Rachel, but I want to bring, you point out the left, let's bring in Richard. Richard, so we spend what could be $100 million in Syria, but the message was sent to the rest of the world. Let me go one step further. This big bomb, this Moab, this concussion bomb over Afghanistan that exploded, $16 million. And here's some video of that. Take a look at that. But, you know, these are the things that send the message to the leaders like Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il in North Korea that says, hey, you don't want to mess with us.
Well, I don't think that Kim Jong-un or his father Kim Jong-il ever responded to this any type of U.S. military response without that they're crazy. So they're not going to respond to us launching weapons. They're just going to launch one themselves. But let me make the point here. Like, there's a lot of reasons why I have for bloated military spending and fraud, waste, and abuse of the Pentagon. But more importantly here is as we continue to do these strikes, what we learned from the George W. Bush era in the failed war in Afghanistan and the failed war in Iraq is we need to also focus on diplomacy, right? So after we go into places like Syria and after we go into Afghanistan and drop the mother of all bombs, how do we go back in and make sure that we have stable governance there? And that is where our diplomats
so you're focusing, hold on, guys, so let me just back up, Richard. So you're focusing on the Syrian strikes and then this Afghanistan bomb as targeted towards Syria and Afghanistan. I'm going to take it one step further. I think these are inexpensive ways of telling people like North Korea, stop playing around, this could get ugly and expensive for both of us. But also, one no one's talking about, Iran has to be watching this. Iran has to be saying, this is a different type of leadership than we've seen over the last few years.
But my point still remains, right? While President Trump is pumping up the Pentagon to a ridiculous amount, we're also cutting the State Department, cutting our diplomats, cutting our embassies, which is our olive branch to the world. And when you cut those embassies and you cut our diplomatic support, the only option left on the table is dropping bombs and killing innocent civilians.
And sometimes, Lisa, the only option is the deterrent option. You know,
Right.
you don't want to go up against a fleet of Moabs coming at you.
I get that, Eric. I get that completely.
Hold on, Richard. Let someone else talk. But when you're also sitting down with President Xi and President Trump tells him that we bombed Syria in response to chemical weapons, that sends a strong message to China that President Trump means what he's talking about in regards to North Korea. And you know what does send a message to North Korea? China turning away those North Korean coal ships, because China is the biggest primary aid as well as trade dealer to North Korea. So that does send a diplomatic message to North Korea that China is meaning business as well, because they recognize the fact that the United States is not playing around anymore.
Wait a minute.
Right.
So let's talk. I'm glad you brought up this China-North Korea thing, because there's some historical context here. The last time we had a decent deal with the North Koreans was in 1993, the Sunshine Policy, where Bill Clinton worked with Chinese diplomats to create some sort of agreement that stopped or slowed down the progression of North Korea getting a nuclear weapon. And this was for the father.
Guys, Richard,
please
hold. Everyone can't go at once. Everyone can't go at once. Let me bring this to Rachel. Rachel, I contend that the Syrian attack and the bomb dropped in Afghanistan had nothing to do with Syria or Afghanistan. It had everything to do with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. And by the way, the attack in Syria, the chemical attack in Syria, the original one that Obama let go because of the red line, people forget, because, you know, Richard's talking about diplomacy. That was about bad diplomacy. Barack Obama was in bed with the Iranians trying to make a secret deal, and that's why he didn't cross the red line, because he didn't want to upset the Iranians. So, you know, that has nothing to do with the funding at the State Department. That's just bad diplomacy, and hopefully Donald Trump will reverse that policy with Iran.
If you cut the State Department by 28%, which is what's reported to be in the Donald Trump budget, that means you're cutting our diplomats, you're cutting foreign aid, you're cutting our ability to talk to the rest of the world.
There was a lot of money in the State Department directed towards climate change and things that
That's
had
not true.
nothing to do with
I gotta go right now. This is clearly
are cutting programs that go to fund programs in Africa,
Richard,
development in Africa. If we want to counterbalance,
I've literally lost control of this segment. I apologize. It's a hot topic, and we promise to come back to it very, very soon.